So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us again. I think we have practically a full house, which shows the amount of interest that all of us working in the sector have for the topic of this roundtable. Obviously a topic which is very keyed into current affairs as well, because we're talking about digitalization and how it transforms the transport and mobility sector. Let me introduce, first of all, a very distinguished panel. We have Mathieu Dunant, who's head of innovation at the RATP Group, the Paris transport area. Mathieu, thank you very much for being with us. Eddie Hartog, who's the EC head of Unit Connect H2 Smart Mobility and Living. Georg Kapsch, CEO of Kapsch Group, Norbert Kalvenhoven, Head of Global Trade Digitalization at IBM, and Ahmed Nasser, Head of Industrial Relations at HERE. Can I just say, we did actually plan this roundtable with two ladies, but they had to cancel at the last minute, so please don't tweet saying that we haven't got enough ladies, because the two ladies we did had to change at the last minute, just in case we get any tweets about not being representative. So, I don't know if you were here yesterday. The format is 4 minutes each to tell us your general take on the question of digitalization in transport and where your particular entity or organization stands on this. I will ask a few questions based on what you said, and then I will come into the audience. There were a lot of questions yesterday, so maybe for 45 minutes at least, so please don't hesitate. It was very lively yesterday, and with these high-level discussions, I often think it's best if we have a lot of comments from the audience. So let's start, first of all, with you, Norbert Kalvenhoven. You're head of Global Trade digitization at IBM. Obviously a very keen subject at the moment. Each week we hear about digitalization. Give us your take on how digitalization is changing and will change the mobility and transport sectors.
Okay, thank you. Happy to do so. Of course, digitization for IBM obviously is a big thing, but related to transportation, it's even bigger. We believe we are in the beginning of an era of change. We are already in that era. And IBM has bet a lot of money on this. We are very strong in the blockchain technology, as some of you might know. And some of you might have seen the press releases recently that IBM and Maersk have decided to start a joint venture, because we've built a data pipeline platform. It's called Global Trade Digitization. And that is to break the silos in the transport industry and to combine data from sea containers all the way from the empty container until the emptied container. And you might think that is already there. Well, the deeper I dive into that topic, the more I find that there's quite some data sharing in parts of the chain and links of the chain, but there's no real data sharing end to end. That's what digitization brings. And if you see the effects it has, it's huge. It's for authorities. Think of a customs organization who does a border check because they have the declaration which says organic material from freight forwarder A to freight forwarder B. But when they arrive at the container, they see from a big distance it's a Coca-Cola container. And if they would have known that as an authorized operator, they would never have inspected that. And if they would have access to the real information all the way from the beginning of the chain to the Coca-Cola factory, they could avoid these unnecessary inspections, saving everybody a lot of money. And the other way around, today there is a declaration, let's say toys, and customs would say, toys, interesting, but okay, innocent stuff. If they would have access to the data pipeline, they would see that it comes from, let's say, China, a firework factory, and that would put this whole concept of toys in a different perspective. It's that type of things. In this platform, we collect events from a container on the ship, off the ship, on the truck, on the quay, but also documents, the packing list, the bill of lading, customs declaration, certificate of origin. All these documents who cause or can cause delays in the movement of a container. And we see by putting these in a shared context, the whole supply chain benefits. And actually a lot of disruptive thoughts start to happen, because why are we doing things this way? We can have shortcuts. Big change. So for us, it's huge, and there's a lot to come.
We'll discuss that, no doubt, at length. Thank you for those few opening words. Georg Kapsch, the CEO of Kapsch Group. Maybe you could give us a short introduction of where you come from on this question of digitalization within the mobility sector.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning. I think I'll be a bit in disagreement with many people in this room and around when I say digitalization as such is a no-brainer, meanwhile, because we are doing as if digitalization was invented just 3 years ago. But this is a process lasting for decades, meanwhile. Just the applications are changing, and maybe the basic technology. But the idea of digitalization is 30 or 40 years. Anyway, I think there are lots of challenges coming up, and digitalization, of course, helps to create, on the one hand side, new business models, and on the other side, it helps to combine different traffic means in a much more comfortable way than it was in the past. So I think we can, in a better way, manage the last mile. And this primarily concerns the urban areas. It's not that much about interurban, it's more about intra-urban traffic. Anyway, when it comes to digitalization and new business models, new players on the market are rising. And that means that the market will be penetrated by different technologies, by different approaches. And what we need to carefully observe is that we build an ecosystem of infrastructure and devices which is coherent in itself. Because if cars and if vehicles cannot communicate in a proper way, which has to be supported by standardization, we will end up in a traffic mess. We will not achieve what we originally intended to achieve, but we will end up in a mess. So that's my perspective on the market. On the other hand, we are always talking about continuity on the one hand side and disruption on the other side. Obviously, new business models lead to disruption. Now we can ask ourselves whether disruption is supportive or advantageous to the sector of mobility. And of course, disruption always helps in terms of innovation. But on the other side, we have to be very, very careful, especially in traffic and transport, that we can guarantee a certain continuity. Because without continuity, we cannot guarantee a backwards compatibility. And to achieve safety and security in transport, most of the vehicles, ideally all vehicles, have to be able to communicate. And that's what we have to achieve. And therefore, a certain regulation is necessary. Also, and now I think I am getting a bit too broad in terms of privacy and data protection, but I think this topic will be addressed by you a little later.
Absolutely. Right, a traffic mess. Mathieu Dunant, you're head of innovation at the RATP Group. This word must be honey to your ears, because if there's a traffic mess overground, then you're RATP. I speak as somebody who has a Pass Navigo. I live in Paris, so I'm very keen to hear what your take is on how to bring digitalization more to the Paris and greater Paris region, Ile-de-France transport system.
Well, good morning, and first of all, congratulations for your Navigo Pass. I'm very happy to see that you are one of our favorite customers. Well, to some extent, I will also agree with Mr. Kapsch, the former speaker. I think we are seeing an era of disruption, but also to some extent, I would also say that we are entering into an era of continuity. What I mean here is, unless and probably until teletransportation is really invented and implemented, moving people from point A to point B will still be a physical process. And that's something on which I would really like to insist a lot, because we speak a lot about digitalization. And I do believe it's something that is obviously very important and that we need to take into account. It really creates new opportunities for us and for our customers. But let's keep in mind that transportation, and especially passenger transportation, is really about moving people in a safe way all around a city. That's something which is really very fundamental. That being said, yes, we are at the same time seeing new behaviors, new expectations from customers, and we're also seeing a lot of new opportunities that are being delivered to us by the new technologies that we are all aware of. So basically, and based on that, cross-fertilization between the new technology opportunities and the new expectation and the new behaviors from the customers, we are at the same time working on new services. So basically on the offer side, new services for the customers, for people who really want to move in a seamless way within a city or within a country. And we're also working on new ways of delivering the services in a more efficient way. So basically, just to give you two examples, and we'll be able to discuss them further. The two big areas that I would like to mention and on which we are working within our ATP group are first, basically AI, so artificial intelligence. It's something that is really going to help us to work in an even more efficient way. By that, I have in mind, for example, predictive maintenance and asset management, asset being the networks that we are operating. I have in mind the way we interact with customers. I have in mind the way people in operating and control centers for train or for metro do operate the trains in real time. AI is really going to provide them and to provide us with a real help to be even more efficient, and that's something that I'll be able to describe. And the second example that I would like to give is really autonomous vehicles, so AVs. We've been working a lot on AVs for more than 3 years. We've been launching experiments in France, but also in the US and abroad. And we really want to work on the new business models, on the new business cases that AVs are really enabling us to offer to the customers. And our way of considering AVs, and more generally speaking, the impact on digitalization of our networks and operations is not really a kind of war between the ancient world, so to speak, and the new world. It's more a way of being able to take the best of both worlds to really create new services for the customers that are more efficient, that are seamless, with integrated, basically ticketing services, with integrated passenger information in real-time services, and basically a service which is very seamless and is able to take the best from, at the same time, train operations, metro operations, bus operations, AV operations, but also car sharing, car pooling, even bikes, and basically walking around the cities.
Can I just ask you one point, because otherwise we'll lose it? You say the changing behavior of consumers. I'm one of your consumers. As you say, I've been living in Paris for 30 years. I haven't changed my behavior. I just want to get from Châtelet to Gare du Nord. It's as simple as that. How have I changed my behavior? You're offering me different services, but am I changing my behavior? I just want to go from one place to the other.
Yeah, you still want to go from one place to another place, but maybe you're not the best example, because you live in the center of a great city and you have a lot of metro services available really next next door to you. But if you live in a more, I would say, remote suburb, before actually you had to use your car to own a car to basically move around the city. The new behaviors are the fact that today you're able not to be the owner of the car, but to benefit from, for example, from car sharing or carpooling services. And if you live in a more remote area, which is not well addressed by public transportation services, if you think about AVs, with AVs, we can create the business models that really enable you to benefit from public transportation services at a very much efficient cost.
Okay, thank you very much. Ahmed Nasser, you're Head of Industrial Relations at HERE. First of all, a few words about HERE and where you stand on this question of how we're all changing our behavior because of digitalization.
First of all, thank you very much for the kind invite. I'm from HERE. HERE Technologies, not only HERE. So I'm not from Vienna, not from Austria, but from HERE Technologies. For those of you who are not familiar with HERE, we are the open location platform company. We are the leading company when it comes to maps, traffic, and intelligent transport systems services. 4 out of 5 cars newly produced in North America and Europe are using our maps. So 80% chance you are using our maps, but you didn't know. We are collecting maps and data all over the globe. We are running 24 hours, 7 days, collecting data. And simply, this is translated into a live map, which I'm happy to explain more about that, which is representing the 3D index of the globe. We are roughly 8,000 employees in almost 55 countries, and more than 100 million connected vehicles are using our maps, together with more than 30 million users on the mobile application, and also on the internet portals like Microsoft. This is quickly about HERE Technologies. Now, the question about digitalization and digital transformations and those acronyms about evolution and disruption. So first of all, I think I will tend to agree with my previous speakers. I thought I would be the only one who is disagreeing with the rest, but it seems this is a common understanding. So actually, digitalization, this is not new at all. Look at our company. We are almost a little bit more than 30 years old company. When we existed in 1984, we were brought to life just to digitalize the map. How many of you have used the card maps or the paper maps to navigate and go around? That was 30 years ago, so people from my generation, maybe older, they know this type of frustration. We still use the card maps. Right? We still come back if we don't have connectivity, if any other issues. But digitalization, we started already 30 years ago, and other companies in this ecosystem have started this. Now, is it evolution or is it disruption? Then it depends how do you look at it, from which angle, what is your sector? We are a data company. I said that we are the open location data company. For data, digitalization is an evolution. We are continuously adding layers on top of the map. So we start with the digital map, a single snapshot of the globe at one single instant. That was 30 years ago, and by the way, that was in California. And now we added several layers of dynamic information, semi-dynamic information to reflect the connected and the more complex ecosystem where we are in. More and more devices, connected vehicles, you can name it, are producing data at the fly. We need to incorporate this in the map. The map has to be live. The map has to be able to cope with the upcoming wave of these autonomous devices, not only highly autonomous vehicles, but also think about the drones of the world, think about machines that are taking more and more control of human beings. So many devices are tied to the location, tied to the map, and this map needs to be up to date and need to be in evolution manner. Now, if we come to disruption, disruption is there because the map is the basic foundation layer, and then you build the services on top of the map. And these services, there where we see the disruption. And I can give you an example. So from producing a single map that's being navigating from A to B to a service that can leverage aggregating data coming from competing car manufacturers to leverage new wave of services that can improve traffic, that can improve safety, etc. That's what we are doing. So we are living in the two worlds. We are in an evolutionary life where our map is being, by the time, is being improved, updated, and adding more and more context. We are collecting 28 terabytes per day globally. We are making more than 1 million updates per day. Enormous. In a scalable global platform. And there we see a lot of disruptions because many of the services that our customers and we are building are on top of this dynamic map. The more you break the silos, as my previous speaker said, the more you bring this data together, the more you are coming with an innovative services that you could never have thought about it before. And this is the trend what we are seeing at the moment. So just let's be careful when we speak about evolution, about digitalization, about digital transformation, because the digital transformation is the pipeline process that combine the change of the data and the change of the services on top of that.
Thank you very much indeed. Eddie Hartog, transformation, disruption. I've kept you to the end because you've been listening to these examples, and now I want you to give us your take on, because you have various different kinds of input in your job. Where do you stand on what's happening? Because the word disruption is a negative word. They've used it several times. Is it all good what's happening, or well, how do you collate all this together?
Well, we don't think in negative and positive. It's happening, and we need to make sure that we geared up to it. That's how we think. That's why we had Gear 2030, to gear up to the new momentum. I would like to make 2 points. One is the evolution, if you like, from specific to generic. I explain. And the second is the importance of working across the EU borders, because we're not there yet. So from the specific to the generic, I mean, in DG Connect, which is the telecommunications part of the European Commission, we've been working on this for 20 years, if not longer, with ITS research and all that sort of stuff. And it was all about telematics on the road, you know, and that is now gradually changing. What we see is artificial intelligence was mentioned. We have a data company here. 5G is coming. We have platforms. And they pose cybersecurity. They pose a number of problems that are actually transversal. They're not specific. And the question is really, how do we find the right balance in solutions that are sector-specific and that actually benefit from the generic evolutions? 2018 is the year of multimodality. And I've been very encouraged by the previous session to see that there was a presentation on cybersecurity in trains. I couldn't follow it because I'm not a technician. But the interesting thing is that I have the impression that the solutions found there are not quite the solutions found for the cars. And I'm not sure how they cross-fertilize. So I think we have work to do there. That is a bit disruptive, but not in a negative sense. It's a different way of looking at things. My second point is about evidence-based policy making. There's a lot of things out there now. They're reality. And I still have theological and theoretical discussions on technology to use, mandate, not mandate technology. I have theoretical discussions on access and use of data. Some of you will know all the details of this, and we will have a few sessions this afternoon. What we have said in DG Connect, in parallel to what the colleagues are doing in DG Move with C-Roads, with what we've done with the car industry, the research colleagues who are also very present today with a lot of research projects, field operational tests, we said it's probably about time that we get real digital cross-border corridors. Because not everyone agrees that the definition of cross-border driving is a car driving across the border from A to B. I'll explain you in detail later the different interpretations. But we think that really, if we want to, as an EU, be joined up, we shouldn't just have the technical and theological and policy discussions as if we were separate countries. We need to make sure that the choices we make them jointly, that they're evidence-based, so that we actually get the technology on the road, get the data management models on the road, test the cybersecurity in the vehicles, and do that in a joined-up manner. To give you a very simple example, I'm asking all the member states now, what spectrum will you use, apart from the ITS services, what spectrum will you use for 5G self-driving cars? Some don't know, and others give different answers. That's not going to be helpful if we want to be competitive and remain competitive with China and the US. I leave it at that.
Okay, well, you've thrown up, all of you, quite a lot of points to discuss. Let's first of all get the question of cybersecurity on the table, which is obviously the elephant in the room. I know it was dealt with in the previous roundtable, but I think it's interesting to have your takes on it, especially in light of, I mean, even this morning, I woke up, I put on the BBC, and there's a Russian attack on cyber things in the UK. Which is making the news. Has it happened? Will it happen? And so forth. This is obviously something, what with Facebook and so forth, which is in the air a lot at the moment. And I mean, I was doing this panel yesterday, and when I heard that some towns are kind of like making, for very understandable reasons, tracking information on women moving around their towns, you do start to worry as a consumer. I mean, Monsieur Dunant, I don't know how much information you have about me. You know I live in the center of Paris from what I said, but do you? Maybe you checked on me before you came here and found out where I live. I'm joking. But...
Well, actually, I have much more information about you by watching you on TV or than
following my
with
Twitter account.
Exactly, or from your tweets, or maybe from your Facebook profile, that the information that I get about from your Navigo Pass. So, and actually that's serious. But that being said, I mean, your question is obviously a very good one, and you've mentioned at least 3 different areas of concerns in your question. There is a question about cybersecurity. There is a question about public safety in public transportation networks, and there is also a question about the use of data. So about data, I think that basically we're lucky enough to live in Europe, where I believe we have a balanced approach between the preservation of basically the rights of people, and especially their digital rights, and the necessary but also balanced access to data to be able to build an efficient AI and digital industry in Europe. So that's the first statement. It's a very general one, but I think it's really a question of balance. And as we say sometimes in France, and the French people here will understand what I mean. In the US, they have the GAFAs or the GAFAMs, and in France we have the CNIL. And we're lucky to have the CNIL, but we also need to keep in mind that the fight between the CNIL, so to speak, and the GAFAs is...
The CNIL is the Comité National...
Informatique et Liberté, yeah. It's basically the public agency which is in charge of making sure that your data rights are preserved, to keep it simple. So the fight between the industrial data giants and basically ourselves is very unbalanced, as we know. So here we really need a European approach, and for sure it is the right level to consider an approach. And so you also mentioned cybersecurity issues and more generally public safety issues. It's something on which we are working a lot. And once again, it's something on which we've been working a lot for like 20 or even more years. If you think about the operating control center of an automated line, as lines that we operate in Paris, but also in different countries in the world, for sure, these OCCs have to be absolutely able to resist any kind of cybersecurity attack. If not, basically the metro system will be in danger. So it's something that we are taking into account very seriously, on which we are working. And the next big question is about AVs. If you think about AV, an automated vehicle is by definition able to move in an autonomous way. And once in a while, it's going to be stuck. Maybe in a traffic jam, maybe behind a car that for one reason or another is going to block the street, or maybe before the system itself is down. And then the question is, what can you do? And if you have a remote access to the vehicle, you need to do it in a very specific and in a very, I would say, cautious way, because then the more doors you open in the autonomous vehicle itself, the more doors potentially you open to basically cyber attacks. So once again, it's a question of balance, but it's also a question of technology, and it's a question of really having the right approach to make sure that you do not create unnecessary threats to the safety of the system.
So let me add my 2 cents to the discussion. I'm not sure if I will bring answers rather than questions. So regarding security and privacy, I think on a very high level, let's agree, and this is fundamental. We are facing a tremendous challenge, all of us, in the sense of change of the economy. At the moment, we are living in what we call the collaborative economy, where the human being is sitting at the edge of the network. The human being is the one who is controlling the service, controlling the data. He is the main actor. This is changing surely, slowly but surely, to the autonomous economy, where the human being is now consuming the data. The AI and the artificial intelligence and other intelligence, machine learning, etc., are taking control of the human being in all industries, in all segments. This is a trend, it's ongoing, and this is part of the disruption. So that means the machines will be the ones who will be taking the decisions in the future. We need to ensure that those machines will be taking the right decisions to ensure security. This is a challenge to all of us. So if we understand this perception, then we can go even further for other challenges on a lower level related to data. Data topic has been mentioned, simply because so every one of us is sitting on a mountain of data. But of course, the value when you combine this data together. Now, once you combine the data, you combine the service, each actor in this value chain creation need to step up and take responsibility and accountability for their part of the security. Because if there is one breach in this value chain, then all of us are being affected. So those two dilemmas, we need to find a solution, all of us. How can we achieve this? It is not for granted, let me say. Now, let me touch on another important topic, so my colleague here referenced to, which is access to the car data. So this is one of the hot topics at the moment in the discussion in the EU. And all of us, we are aware of the consensus that being reached by the car automotive industry to share their data. So leading car association like VDA and ASEA in Europe, together with the leading car manufacturers, they have agreed a consensus, together with the European Commission and other European member states, to share their data. But this is a very wide concept. It's not sharing their data. It is, they are categorizing the data in 4 different categories, and it's only the data related to safety that need to be accessed and shared. Now, how can we access it? Who has the right to access it? Which platforms that will aggregate the data? This is the current discussion that we are following in the EU with regard to the access of the car data.
Well, basically, I agree with you, and the core question, but I think this leads too far for this panel, is whether it's desirable that artificial intelligence really takes over and substitutes human intelligence. But I think this is more of a philosophical question than of reality, because in reality it's going the way you already explained.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it's concerns of all. If all these transport systems are going to be controlled by robots, basically it is concerning us all as whether we should let that happen, because are they going to make the right choices?
Okay, may I add something? Look, I'm in the IT industry for 30 years, so I could easily follow what cyber attacks are all about. And I really doubt that one really can protect a device against hacking. Hackers are always in advance. They are always the first movers. And that's really a risk we have to deal with very, very carefully. And this has nothing to do with data protection. Data protection is a completely different issue. And when it comes to data protection, I think that's twofold. One is the general data protection, which is governed by the General Data Protection Regulation. And what I am afraid of is that this regulation will not achieve its original goals, because it will not hit those who were intended to be hit, but it will hit others, especially the industry. It will not hit, from my perspective, but maybe I'm wrong, it will not hit the big data companies. Because if you are in a business relationship with a big data company, and that's what you are, even if you are just a consumer, you sign that they can do everything with your data, because otherwise you don't get access to their systems. So I think that's really an issue we have to deal with. And on the other hand, well, this is the general layer. And on the other hand, we have specific layers which have to be governed by kind of a data controller. And the data controller has to manage especially the means of data processing. But currently, but maybe I'm wrong and someone here has the answer, no one really knows who the data controller will be within the respective value chain. And I think that's also an issue we have to address. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes.
Okay.
I want answers, first of all, from IBM, then from the European Commission.
Well, I was going to point to, let's say, different aspect of cybersecurity. That is the fact that we live in a networked world, so that all the systems are connected. And if there's a cyber attack, that we can be, really the whole society can be stopped. And the trains don't run, the ports get closed. And we already had some examples of that. A few months ago, we had in the afterwake of the Ukraine conflict, there were the Maersk systems, the invoicing system was contaminated somehow, and this trickled through all the way to the port of Rotterdam, which actually for their operations was closed for 3 days, because they couldn't trust the data they had in their systems were still accurate. They just didn't know what the status was. Closed everything down, went to manual, which is a nightmare. Afterwards had to recover that. And the CEO announced he had an 800 million euro loss. That was just one company, just one attack. It was more or less not even an attack, it was more like an accident, you could say. So I would say we have to be very realistic and realize this is not going to go away. And I agree absolutely with you, there is no full protection. So we should make sure that whatever we design, whether it's mobility systems or transport systems, that we focus very much on the resilience. And that's where technology comes in. It's human behavior, because in the end we have to make the technology so secure that the human becomes the weakest link. I mean, there's always the human in the end who's the weakest link, and that's the toughest one to fight. But at least the technology should be very secure. And that's also why we, for example, in our GTD platform use the blockchain technology, which offers a number of let's see, protection measures, because it has a distributed database. Every player has a copy of the full data set. So if somebody fiddles around with the data, at least you know that the different databases get out of sync. So you know something is wrong, and you can figure out, because the other nodes, and hopefully they're not all together at the same way disrupted, but you can still find the original data and restore it. So that's the type of resilience you're looking for. And there's, for different categories of systems, different technologies, but it will and has to be a strong focus for the coming era.
Okay, Eddie Hartog.
Yeah, Alex, I think your question from the human towards the technology is the right question. Because often in these seminars we talk about, you know, how wonderful everything could be, but it's really what is the trust that the consumer has, what is the trust that the citizen has. And I think there's a lot of work going on this. mostly in the private sector, and I congratulate them on that, but also in the European governments under the German leadership at the high-level dialogue. They've set up a task force to look at those ethical questions. Now, it's only a task force, I know, and it's only paperwork, but it is at the heart of the things that we are considering. I know that my colleagues from the research department, and some of them are here, are also doing studies on this. So it is at the heart of what we're trying to do. It's not just a sideshow, if you like, to fill the gap. So I think it's important. On the trust and ethical questions and on the security, now, first of all, you need to decide what sort of model do you want? Do you just close everything off and then hope, build firewalls around it? Or do you use open ecosystems that actually improve constantly? Those are fundamental choices. I don't think we need to make them as governments, they need to be made as industry. But on the data protection, I'm actually quite proud. I have nothing to do with the data protection regulation. I didn't draft it, didn't negotiate it. I'm just looking at it in a way like you are. And a lot of the questions are about the legal interpretation and the things that we need to look at. But I've seen two things that are very helpful in that sense, and you can see who can hammer whom in which court. That's not the debate we're interested in. What I'm interested in is that, particularly in the context of this connected automated mobility, the people that are responsible for data protection have actually opened a conversation with the technicians to say, well, how can we make this work? And that is precisely the spirit of that data protection regulation. It's not about to hammer people in court, it's about getting the thing done. So Georg is maybe right that we need to think about it, but there is work going on, and actually before we propose a solution, they engage in a conversation. The second thing is, and that's what I'm proud of as a European, is that the data protection regulation, its objectives, have become the global standard. Most people that are now hammered in Senate hearings or wherever say, you know what, if I just apply the European law, I'm probably fine. As the Irish would say, I'm probably, well, I don't mention names, but then as the Irish would say, then I'm grand. So it has become the global standard. And I think we can be proud of that, having done that together. Not only Commission, we've done ourselves proud, combined with privacy legislation, also the privacy of the communication message. There my call is on the legislator to step it up so that also that regulation will become applicable. I think we can be collectively proud to make this work. Colleagues from DG Move are having precisely the debates that Georg is asking for. How can we make this work? It's done through what we call a delegated act, which is a next sort of implementing part of a legislation. In the ITS context, how can we make this work? And I've been part of some of these conversations. They're not easy. They're not easy, technically, legally, they're not easy. But we are making progress to make sure that the intention of that regulation actually bites. And by doing that, and if we can make it work in Europe, again, also for the sector that we're talking of today, we will become and remain the global leaders.
Okay, we've been quite disruptive so far about the disadvantages and the polemics around it. Before I come into the audience, because I'm sure that there are a lot of questions people want to ask you about this, I would like just for you to answer one more of my questions, which is basically, you've been saying that these digital transformations have been going on for 30 years, and that we imagine falsely that we're all of a sudden at the tipping point where things are different. But are we or are we not at a tipping point? I ask you the question in a very simple way, just before I go into the audience. Could you each tell me in what way, in 5 or 10 years, my experience as somebody who uses transport all the time will change in a positive way that wasn't the case 20 or 30 years ago? Are we on the cusp of something exciting and new that in 5 years' time I will travel, I will be mobile in a different way because of digitalization? Give me a few examples of that, because we've been quite negative so far. I want to now hear how this is going to transform my life as a consumer, as somebody who moves all the time, in a better way. Then I will come into the audience.
So if I may start, I'm sorry, I have to comment on the previous one around the GDPR and then come back to that question. So when we speak about security or GDPR or privacy, we need to distinguish, is it personal data or non-personal data? This is very important. So GDPR regulation, it's about the personal data, full stop. If it's a non-personal data, then we are entering into a different discussion. And if it's an individual, or is it a collaborative effort, and then there will be this value chain, and this will be accountability of each player in the ecosystem to be accountable. So just wanted to highlight this. Now, coming back to your example, again, looking back to what I said at the beginning, the data is the foundation layer. We build the services on top of that. You don't expect much from the data, but you would expect more from the services. The way how we see the service moving forward is just combining different bits and bytes from the data, from all these silos that are residing inside. For instance, if you look at the transport system, even in the automotive industry, each OEM has their own data in their own silo. The power in aggregating in an intelligent way, adding intelligence and adding location context to all this type of data, and the respective services to come up with the new innovative services. And the great examples that we have now, which is going even to launch this year, it's about the hazard safety services that here is developing, together with competing OEMs that are sharing their basic safety-related information that coming from the car sensor data, combine it on one aggregated platform, and push it in the EU. Not only in the EU, but globally. So all the drivers of the connected vehicles can receive this. Also the non-connected vehicles with aftermarket devices. So this is kind of innovative services. And this is, I come back to the regulations of the European Commission, the famous 886/2013, about the SRTI, the safety-related traffic information. We are enabling this now on a global scale. So it means the right for the European citizen to have the minimum safety-related information that will improve their life, will enhance their life, will improve the system is going to happen already this year. So this is, so I'm not even looking in the 5 years from now. There is innovative services are already being now pushed in the market that will change the way that we navigate, the way that we receive data. It's not enough to rely on a mobile application where we push, yes, I received a blockage in the road, or I saw a rain, and you enter in this distraction mood in driving. The automation is playing a role. We understand the disruption is playing a role. Let's use it as an opportunity. It's not a challenge. Let's use it as an opportunity, and let's combine together this silo data to come with innovative services that all of us will benefit.
Okay, thank you. I fully agree with you that we have to distinguish the kind of data. And what we in the industry are doing is we pseudonymize data, so this shouldn't be a threat. And when we are talking about data, and when we are looking at data, we should distinguish between looking at it as a threat or as a risk. Because if we look at a threat, we of course have to take other measures than if we look at it as a risk. Because if we look at it as a risk, we need mitigation and not protection. So I think that's a different view. But you were asking the question, what can you expect in 5 to 10 years? Frankly speaking, I can't tell you. I really can't tell you. I can tell you my personal vision. But I don't know if I'm wrong or if I'm right, because things are moving that fast and sometimes disruptive. So, and disruption is very difficult to predict. Anyway, I think you will be in a more seamless way, in a more seamless environment than you are today. And there will be platforms on top of the digital infrastructure which allows you in a very convenient way to decide whether you want to commute in a very fast way, or if you want to commute in a very environmentally efficient way, or if you want to to commute in a very convenient, in the most convenient way, or in the cheapest way, for instance. So that's what what's for you very hard today to decide. And if we think about autonomous vehicles and shared vehicles, you will have a different opportunity. You will have an opportunity to use public transport and individual transport in a different way. And currently there are lots of analysis done in the United States whether autonomous vehicles will lead to more or to less traffic. And currently, it's not autonomous, but it's the Ubers of this world. It leads to more traffic on the roads, not just because of parking in the second row, but because of more people using that and less people, and I think this is really unfortunate, less people are using public transport. So, but I can't give you a hint, I can't predict that.
Étonnez-moi.
Yes, I would agree with that, because the question about congestion in cities is not about autonomous vehicles. I mean, a car is a car, be it autonomous or not. So the question is, how many people do you have in a car when the car is traveling within the limits of the city? That's the question. But getting back to the initial question about whether or not we are seeing at this time a tipping point. I mean, future is very hard to predict indeed, but I would say yes. And I would say yes, and actually there are two tipping points. The first one is about, has not much to do with digitalization, but it's really about green mobility. That's really a major change that we are seeing all over Europe. So that's really a tipping point. And the other one about digitalization is probably a little bit more, I mean, hard to really perceive, or at least it's very hard to define when the tipping point is. But there are three, at least, I would say, converging factors that have already been mentioned by some of my colleagues here. The first one is that because of the digitalization and especially because of AVs, we are able to build sustainable business models for new mobility services that we were not able to provide so far to the customers because they were not basically sustainable. So AVs are really going to be a major change. They are not going to, I would say, to disrupt everything. Public transportation will still rely basically on mass transit networks, but with AVs, we are really able to create new sustainable business models to offer mobility services to customers that were not provided so far with such services. That's a major change. The other one is, because of digitalization, we are able to make the best use or an even better use of the assets that we are using for transportation. And by assets, I mean basically the cars, the existing park of cars, I mean the trains, I mean the tracks, but I also mean the roads and the streets within the cities. And that's something that we're going to use to reduce congestion, but it's not only about basically mobility service providers or about public transportation operators. It's something that will rely on the combination of the efforts of basically the regulators, the transportation authorities, the metropolitan authorities, and the operators themselves. And the last thing that is digitalization enables us to do is basically integration. It's something that has been mentioned earlier, but with the digital services, you can really envision seamless services to the customers. And that's really the combination of the three items that I have mentioned. That, in my opinion, is going to be or to build, so to speak, the tipping point.
I was listening to you, and as I've been listening to you, you're talking about seamless things. I have an example just of this. The Pass Navigo, for example, Paris changed its bike system, the free bike system, and it was very good for me to talk about seamless when I could use my Metro card to suddenly get a bike. But then when they changed the system, it must be just a tiny little digital thing, but it changed my life for about a month because I couldn't get the Metro system to work with the new bike system, so I had to get a new code. And for a computer, this is a kind of nano data, but for me, for a month, I had to keep going and trying to put the new code, and it really made me frustrated because for a month, I didn't use bikes anymore. So now it's okay, it's become seamless, but I was thinking of that. That's the kind of thing that actually changes, people's practice and makes transport more easy. Give me some good examples, and I'll come to the audience. Just a few brief ways it's going to make life change for the better for all of us?
Yeah, I think my focus is a lot on transportation of containers and goods. And there you will be sure that we are going to fully automated ports where autonomous ships drive in, of sail in, I should say, and be offloaded by autonomous cranes. And a port will be like a machine, more or less. And by really end-to-end sharing of data, there's much more insight. So like a person is planning and with one card is using all the systems of the different multimodal ways of transport, you have the same for containers. So it will reduce enormously the way we work. Think about all the administrative burden, the forms to be filled. Every truck driver has 5 centimeters of paper forms. Every border crossing, 3 centimeters of forms have to be filled, copied, retyped. That can all change and will change. So I think the life of a container will be much more easy, like the life of a public sector, public transportation travel in Paris. There's a good future ahead of us. 5 years, I don't know, but it will go fast.
Yeah. I think there have already been a couple of tipping points, because when Alex just said, yeah, but I'm doing the same thing as 10 years ago, going from A to B on the metro. Yeah, but you're doing different things while you're doing that. You were reading the paper before or reading a book, and now you're actually doing your emails and doing all sorts of other things. So that has already been a tipping point. Now, tipping point prediction, Georg is right, we don't know. But I have a dream. I have a dream that that card that you've shown now a couple of times, that you come from a Vienna airport and you don't have to download yet another app and yet another thing, and that you have mobility as a service with that French card, Oyster card, Leap card in Ireland, Belgian card. You come to the Vienna metro, you just tick it, and then there's some sort of settlement. Mobility as a service, that's a typical one. I have a dream that my wife is Irish, so I drove from Belgium to Ireland through France, that I don't have to download 6 apps, and I actually never paid the UK toll, but I just have a little box in my car, and with that box in the European Union, they just charge me whatever they need to charge. That's the dream I have. It's 5 years, 10 years, it will happen. The real question is the tipping point that this is going to be European technology, a European value added, or non-European technology and non-European value added. And hence there is a sense of urgency to get our act together.
Right, okay, I'll take questions. If you could show me if you want to ask them. Each time it's always interesting to know who is speaking. If you could introduce yourself.
Good morning, Paul from the Irish Maritime Development Office. I suppose everyone knows Ireland has a unique geography and economic location in Europe, and our peripherality is a big concern, obviously. So I was keen to get the panel's views on how digitalisation can address peripherality issues for Ireland and other member states.
I've done regional policy for a long time, for 14 years, and particularly for Ireland. So Ireland is not peripheral. No country is peripheral. Ireland is central in the Atlantic Ocean. And in the UK, US, European economy, Ireland is central. So it's not peripheral. But there are issues of connecting this seamlessly. And I'm actually in conversations with Ireland also to step it up in this game on the self-driving cars. And I think a lot of it will be technology driven. You see increased routes. I think Norbert was mentioning something about shipping, which is much more seamlessly. So the cost involved of being remote, whether that's by sea or land, should in the end reduce also by the use of digital technology. And if not only Ireland, but also I'm thinking of the outermost regions of Europe who also have a certain distance from mainland Europe. If we can make that work at Europe, and the digital is one element of that, I think we will make an important step away from that peripherality.
Yeah, I would build on that. Of course, for the border of Ireland, between Ireland and Northern Ireland, or the upcoming border, there is a big discussion about customs and moving goods and all the paperwork done, and nobody likes to have a border where there's no border now. So I think solution is a lot in technology, in sense of digitizing what's happening, so that you can drive seamlessly across with all your stuff and your family. And yes, there might be a digital trail, so that governments afterwards can check that you were indeed you, and that they know how many people crossed the border. It will be a border of some kind, But I think that's the direction where the politicians probably will go, and technology can play a major role. And obviously, our platform for cargo sharing is one of the examples, but there will be others. So we'll fix that.
Okay, just one question which came up yesterday, but I'd obviously like to hear your views because it's very cogent to what we're talking about. What about people who are not connected? I gave the example of my stepmother who just refuses. It's not her world. She just doesn't want to have a smartphone, and yet she moves around all the time. She uses trains, buses, she drives. And there are quite a few people like this. I even know some young people who are not connected because they just don't want to be part of this world. What are you going to do for them? Are they going to be excluded? Because what we're talking about is almost saying to people, if you're not digitally connected, then we can't do much for you in the future. Is that what we're saying to them?
Very sensitive. You go first.
Okay. So I think there will always be a certain part of the population that is not willing to just join the general trends. I think we have to distinguish between those who are not able to do so and those who are not willing to do so. Those who are not able to do so, we have to care about. Those who are not willing, they are doing that by intent. So I don't think that we are responsible for them. Anyway, it could easily happen, but this is a philosophical question as well, that more and more people are considering whether it's really advantageous for them to be connected all the time, and if they want to be monitored all around the day and all through their lives. But I think that is the decision of each and everyone. In the end, I just reiterate, those who are not able to connect, we have to care about.
Let me just add a quick comment on this, and let me take an example of the Netherlands. So there is a survey in the Netherlands saying that 10% of the early morning traffic in a certain area is due to elderly people going to the hospitals to check their doctors, and basically unconnected travelers. So this is the group of people who are unwillingly not connected. So we care about them, and probably we have to update the service, change the timing of these visits. This is our care, this is our role to see how the service or how our services can be updated to take care of these people. So indirectly, we bring them in the stream of the network congestion or traffic, but on a suitable time in the day. So that can be also adding to this, this specific example.
Yeah, and I will also add that, I mean, mobility is really about inclusion. I mean, that's, if you think about big cities, it's because of mobility services that you also have basically inclusion within the cities. So yes, for sure, we have to take into account people who are not able for one reason or another to have access, for example, to digital services. And I also agree with you. I mean, there is a difference to be made between people who do not want to access those services and people who are not able to access, I mean, those services. But it is really our duty, and it's even our mission to care about the people and all the people who need to have access basically to mobility services, whether or not they are able to really use the new digital services that we are providing them with. So we really need to take that into consideration for sure.
Yeah, and sorry, I just want to add one little thing, that it is, I think, our duty also to make sure there are rules for people who don't like to be monitored. I think it's unavoidable that your data gets collected. There's cameras everywhere, everything is chipped and Internet of Things connected. So that your data are collected is one thing, but that you forbid people to do the wrong things with it. I think that is where the crux of the matter is, and that's where we as society can decide what we allow the use of data for.
This is Alberto Sanna from San Raffaele Hospital in Milan, and my point was exactly on aging society. And not only on the issue of digital integration, we have the need of physical integration. If you want people moving from one mode to another mode, I want to remember to all of us that there are steps to be done. There are places to be accessed. There are steps to go into a bus. There are ways to stay on a bus, on a train, which are different if you are an elderly people or if you are young people. We need, absolutely need to take into account also the physical, ergonomic, and cognitive seamless interaction, not only the digital one. This is a key point. Europe is the most rapidly aging society. We are going to age more and more, and this is not only a business opportunity, is an immense right for individuals to participate to the society, because mobility is the key access to society for all of us, above all for elderlies.
Okay, I think that was more a comment than a question, but a very important one. Yes?
Gareth McNaughton from RMIT. We are an Australian research entity in Europe. I was a little concerned with what was just said there. Right now on autonomous driving, it's the car that has to have identification in the technology. But at one point for this to work, you're going to have every citizen identified and connected. If I'm an elderly person who's 80, that car might want to know I've hard of hearing, okay? And it might need to send that message so the car behaves differently. So there's a point in this ITS where it does come to the individuals. Are you thinking about that? And at what point, unless we adhere to this IT systems, at what point will you be excluded from using transportation mass systems unless you give up your data? I mean, these are the questions that I think are really challenging for transport.
Anyone want to take that on?
Yeah.
Yes,
well, thank you very much for this comment. I don't really know if I got you right. If I got you right, this is a crucial issue and I think most of us are not really dealing with. Do I understand you right that you are saying there are different people with different behaviors in different ages or whatsoever, different physical or mental situations, and technology has to adapt itself and its behavior to the behavior of the user? Okay, so I think, thank you very much for this advice. I will take this home and discuss this internally, because that's what honestly, I did not think about. Well, we were thinking about that in terms of public transport, to make it easier accessible, and of course, maybe the OEMs in the automotive, maybe they do the same. But I agree with you. The problem with that in autonomous driving is that in order to have the driving, the flow, the traffic flow, seamless, the cars have more or less to drive the same way. Otherwise, autonomous driving doesn't make any sense. So, but I will think about it, and thank you very much for this advice.
So my name is Muriel de Zager from Toyota. I think that 2 points are on the agenda of EU. One is digitalization, and the other one is decarbonization. We spoke a lot about business model this morning, and my question is, do you think that digitalization will be the tool for financing decarbonization?
Very important point. Who would like to take that?
Well, I would like to say that you need an exact register of the footprint of the carbon before you can act on it. So digitization certainly helps to, if you think about multimodal transport end-to-end, to register where the carbon is produced. And you can do analysis on bottlenecks where carbon is produced mostly. You can optimize your planning tools on giving advice on routes that are less or more carbon polluting. So in that sense, I think they're a big support. Financing, I'm not sure, but I think they're definitely a key in creating more transparency and an important tool in helping decarbonization.
So just to comment on this, I'm not sure even if digitalization is helping. I give you an example. In the navigation industry, there are a lot of trials to have the best route that is carbon friendly or CO2 friendly. The point is the user are not using them. At the end of the day, the user is choosing the fastest route. So even if the industry, if I'm looking for a certain segment, investing on R&D and effort to develop the best navigation app that we can reduce CO2 emissions in the network, the end users, at the end of the day, are not using them. Maybe there is a partial amount of users who have this self-conscious and they care about the globe, then they are using that. But at the end of the day, this is not helping. Because if you invest and you don't have a return on investment, then the industry facing hard time to deliver what is requested. So it's a chicken and egg. We all need to agree and apply. Not only, we have the best CO2 navigation or route available, but we have to use it.
But I don't think I can answer who is going to finance which, because there's a whole debate on business models going out. But I think there is an issue of digital techniques being used to optimize the transport flows and the use of electricity. And I think that is something where it does play a role, and you can even increase the actuators by knowing which speed at which level, where to charge, when to charge, and thus optimize the use. So I think there is an interplay between the non-fossil fuel discussion and the digitalization discussion that there is. Not sure who finances who, but that there is something happening there. Even some of the slides from the previous session show that with these knowing where you are, you can optimize even the speeds of trains. I think you can optimize that also for energy consumption.
Yeah. Christian Rakovic from BMFIT. A lot of dreams have been evoked. European Commission used to have a dream that is linking distant European regions, even peripheral ones, within 4 hours. My dream is a much more modest one. I leave away the time constraint. So my question is, when will I be able, thanks to digitalization, that for such a use case from distant European regions towards the periphery, I will be able to purchase a seamless mobility as a service package, let's call it like that. And how will I be sure that I can get a good deal on that? Thanks.
Answer? Well, mobility as a service very much depends, especially on the willingness. Should I stop? Okay. On the willingness, especially of the municipalities, to be open-minded and to reduce regulations. So I think it's not about the technical possibilities, it's more about operational issues and cooperation between private operators and the public sector. I think that's the key, especially in urban areas. I don't know whether you agree or not.
Yeah. I agree, yes, to some extent. Actually, I mean, mobility as a service is a very nice concept, but it's not that easy to implement. What I mean here is, just like you said, there is an interplay to be I mean, defined between public transportation authorities and the operators themselves. I mean, some cooperation has to be created and installed, and And I think that someone has to take the lead. So the leader will probably be very different depending on the various, city or country situations. In large urban areas, it's more probably the public transportation authorities that are the more legitimate to take the lead. But once again, it will probably depend on the very specific situation of everyone. And then, to really be able to offer a platform, you need to get the integration level. But I would say that the integration level is to some extent the easy part of it. Let's not forget that even if we are integrating services through digitalization, at the very end, we need to get the services themselves. So mobility as a service is nothing without the real services. And before, thinking about integrating them, you need to, run them, to operate them, and sometimes even to create them. So what I really mean here is that, okay, it's a very nice concept. We all agree that we need to work on it. It's going to happen. Sometimes it's easier when, for example, the city is smaller, or when the institutional situation is easier to deal with. But let's not forget that to be able to integrate services within a platform, first you need to have the real services running. That's the key issue.
Hello, Georges Becognac is from ENAC Toulouse, coming from aviation world. But I have a comment and a question. The comment is really, what is our objective? Is it to make things more digital? Is it to decarbonize? What is our real objective? I think it is to have another relation to the trips and to transportation. We have to, as a mobility as a service, to provide to each of us the way to enjoy the travels. So the way to interact differently in our travel time, to take pleasure during our travel. I will have to take a bus, a train, bike, whatever, to my final destination. How I can enjoy this trip. Do I enjoy it if I have to change different features, if I have to mind about at what time I can reach my train or not, if I can make it or not? Can I enjoy it if I don't know what is going to happen in the coming hours, if I will make it to be in time for my family in my vacation location? So all that is part of the deal. Can I enjoy it if I have to care, if I can hear or not something in my car about the information around, or in my airplane if the pilot is well aware of what is going on? So all that is a matter of services, and we have to be the service of the passengers, of the travelers, and to find solutions to make it easy. So we have to put the hours in, all of us, to be able to listen ourselves, even ourselves, by traveling. We are facing many situations. In order to put in place the right solutions, we have to break the walls between the communities, between the different modes of transport, between the different levels of authorities, between cities and regions, to go further in the final objective, which is not the city or the decarbonization or showing that we are making digitalization, is to serve the passengers. Sorry.
So let me take that one. So digitalization, what is digitalization? It is transforming the information into a digital data, right? And why do we do this? To accelerate service implementation and to enhance our daily life. So that means if I sit in my highly autonomous vehicle, I can press a button and I'm not worried about the traffic. I'm not worried about that I find the parking place at the end of the destination. I'm not worried about paying that parking, etc. So that's why I think, at least in the transport sector, we are striving for more autonomous services, etc. But since you are from the aviation industry, which is a different world than the transport aviation, I have also a dream. I have heard some dreams today. So my dream is to reach this autonomous vehicle. And the question is to the aviation industry, why the autopilot that was first invented in 1912, more than a decade ago, Why at this point we still don't have a fully autonomous plane? Why do we always have two pilots or pilot and co-pilots in the cockpit chamber in the plane? Didn't happen. After 1 decade, I don't find the answer. And my dream, I'm looking to that one first. If we have an autonomous plane, I have seen autonomous drones, yes. Okay. But what about the airplanes that we all using on a weekly or a monthly basis? That's my dream.
Okay, we only have about 5 minutes left. I'll take 1 or 2 quick questions, if you could tell us who you are. Perhaps I'll take 1 or 2 together and then give you all a conclusion at the end. So I'll take the 2 or 3 questions I can see here.
Hi, I'm Akassar from University of East Anglia. Basically, I have a curious question to the panel. Is it possible to create customized product with personal data, with limited personal data? Because as we were talking about personal data, some people may be hesitant when sharing it. And most of the products are moving at customizing. So yeah, that's my question.
Okay, I'll take, there were 2 other people who wanted to make points here, then I'll hand over to you. Who were the, oh, now everybody's putting their hand up. I'll just take 1 or 2. Yes, gentleman here.
Thank you very much. I have a question. I put to everybody of you the question, but I explain, and then after that, I explain why. First, the question, what is the most important restrictions or limits which prevent the development towards digitalized transportation system and mobility system in EU area? Why I put this question? You know that there are a lot of differences between each EU countries, between enterprises regarding their sizes, their level of utilizing information, and there are differences between consumers, their knowledge base and attitudes and so on. So, what is the most important factors you see? Everybody can answer.
Perfect. All of a sudden there's 10 hands. I'll take this gentleman here, I think asked a few minutes ago. You wanted to make a point too? Yes.
Yes, I have only one short question. I'm Jenan Jaffe from LVTH Aachen. It is interesting, do you know perhaps which country or which culture are mostly open to share the personal data?
Okay, thank you very much. This gentleman here. I'll take 2 more questions, then you conclude.
Yes, actually it's a short update to the gentleman's point on why aviation hasn't provided any further automation. So in 1912, Honeywell actually came up with the first stabilizer. It wasn't the full flight management computer. That was 1912. Today, and actually already for the last 20 years, we have fully automated flights. Even space shuttles fly fully automated. So there is a great degree of automation already available in aviation.
Okay, and I'll take this young gentleman's point, and then I'll hand over to your conclusion. I'm sorry, all of a sudden there's masses of questions.
Good morning, Joris von der Ras from the European Commission's Joint Research Center. I was wondering if within all these nice studies that you've described, have you done any analysis on the impact on jobs? Because every time we have the auto word together with a sentence, usually it means that some people might lose their jobs. So have you done any analysis on that? And will your companies be willing to pay a, let's call it a social compensation tax in case you deploy such systems? Thank you.
Right, I apologize to all the people who haven't been able to answer their questions, but I think we've had quite a lot of issues raised, and you have 1 minute each, not even, to answer those questions as a form of conclusion. Impossible, but at least we've shown what an interesting area this all is. Let's start with here.
Okay, I will just answer quickly the two questions raised about the personalized services. Yes, it is possible, and this is part of the new innovative services that yet to come. Once you enter your vehicle, the vehicle will understand that this person X have entered the vehicle and then will take all your contextual information into place to stop you on the right coffee shop along the road to deliver your kids to the school. So that's ongoing, it's coming, complying with privacy by design and GDPR, because here we are talking about personal data. The gentleman asking about the EU consensus or the EU countries on data sharing. I think the public data are shareable. All the EU countries are open to share the data. The national access points have been put into life just to catalog or look into the catalog of data available. Now it's up to the industry and the government and the public sector to agree on the standards and the way that we share the data. Now what is new on that the industry now is open to share data. So that should be a good news for you.
Perfect. Mathieu Dunon.
Yeah, I'll take the question about the jobs. Indeed, it's a very serious issue. And just to give you an example, we've been working in Paris on the automation of metro lines for more than 20 years. And actually, we have been creating new jobs. So for sure, some jobs are going to be changed, to be transformed. But just to give you a very practical example, I mean, the former train drivers have been trained into basically OCC supervisors. So we also believe that because of the new technology, you can create new jobs with more added values. So yes, I mean, some changes are going to be made, but it's also a great opportunity to create new jobs with more added value. And very quickly about the customized services, I agree with what you said. And yes, because of your basically passenger experience and very specific needs, especially with automations and AVs, but also within a kind of immersive experience, we'll be able to create, I mean, new services really dedicated to you personally.
Kapsch.
Okay, I pick out two or a third one quickly. First is the impact on jobs and the risk of unemployment. There is obviously risk of unemployment, and well, I'm from the industry. And anyway, we have to care about people who will not be employed in the future. But it's not a solution just to pay for them via a new tax system, because this is a social issue, because people basically want to work. And there are lots of surveys that are saying, well, we will create new jobs, undoubtedly, and I agree with you, but we will also use lots of jobs. Secondly, where is the biggest obstacle? I think, and I come back to what you said, that you would have the desire of having a seamless, for instance, toll system around Europe. Well, from a technical perspective that exists, it's more a regulation issue, and it's more that especially the big countries in Europe are protecting their national operators. So that's from my perspective the issue. And the last question that I want to answer is which country is most open to data. Unfortunately, I cannot answer this question. I think it's more about institutions, and it's more about, and that's what we should address in the future, not to have monopolies or oligopolies in data. And that's what is emerging now. And that's the real threat.
Okay, I want to pick indeed the jobs question, which is very intriguing. I would say it is happening anyway. So if you don't, as a country or an economy, you don't participate and you make optimal use of digitization, you will lose jobs. So we will have to move forward and be competitive. Otherwise, we'll be really out of jobs. And the social consequences have to be covered. And new jobs will emerge, will have to emerge. About the hurdles, you talk about regulators. I would say the biggest hurdle I see in seamless sharing of data is more that existing data owners who are on a, let's say, monopoly position of some kind, they usually want to protect their business. And if we can get their mentality to realize that by sharing, we all win, I think that is the best way forward. And that's where the hurdle is that we have to jump over.
Yeah, on the personalized services, very good question. I'm glad that it can be done without giving away too much data. But the real question is your commercial relationship. What do you want to give? What do you get in return? That's one thing. But let's separate that from what if you give that data for personalized services and it's used for something else. And that is what data protection is about. That is a different issue. On the biggest obstacle, in my view, the biggest obstacle if you start if you separate the sector-specific solutions that are found from the broader digital developments that are taking place through 5G, artificial intelligence, IoT, etc. That is risky because mobility is not on its own. It's part of a much broader societal system.
Okay, well, I think we probably raised more questions than we gave answers, but then that just shows what an exciting industry and what an exciting time we all live in. Thank you very much indeed to our panel. Big round of applause. Dank u wel.